So today, we're going to go see Charles Bukowski's Hell.
You guessed it. Missed it again by 1 minute. Well, today, our story kind of kicks it back to 1952. Because it's about Bukowski. In 1952, Charles Bukowski was a guy looking for a job. And what he ended up encountering was he got a job with the post office, knowing it would provide him with a pretty good retirement and benefits and everything. He started working there, but he was made a substitute mail carrier. For whatever reason, Bukowski's boss, from the moment he met him, didn't like him, and Charles pretty much felt the same way. So after 2.5 years of struggling with this guy, Bukowski turned in his resignation and said that he needed to leave his post because he was having ulcers. And so he left the post office. But then just about a half a year later, Charles decides he wants his job back. He writes a letter to the post office, claims that he acted in haste turning in his resignation and that he would like to work there again. He sent that in 1955. Finally, in 1958, he was rehired, and he worked here at this terminal annex in downtown. And this is a place that Charles Bukowski would refer to for 11.5 years as hell. Now he got a third shift position here as a clerk, and what his job entailed was he had to sit in a scheme. And what a scheme was at that time, and probably is to this day, I really don't know. What he had to do is he sat in a plexiglass cubicle, and it had a bunch of cheese boxes around him. And if you don't know what a cheese box is basically a wall-size unit that has little cubby holes in it for mail, and you would have seen them in old hotels. But that was Charles' job, and absolutely drove him mad. He would work third shift because he said, well, I couldn't sleep anyway. He would get off, he would go home, sleep, wake up, start drinking, write, and then go to work. And he would repeat this for 11.5 years. Now what he said was, this was the job that almost killed him. And why it almost killed him was because with that position in the scheme, he was tested every 6 months on speed and accuracy. So he would have to sit in that cubicle and throw mail into these card slots, and if he didn't do it properly in the amount of time that the post office believed he should, you lost your job. And apparently he saw a lot of people lose his job, and this created a horrendous amount of stress for Bukowski. His wife even said that she met him during this time, and because he worked so much and he wrote so much, she barely even saw him. And it wasn't until she became pregnant that he ever proposed to marry her, and she didn't even want to marry him. She said that they had been together for 3 years having unprotected sex, and she had been divorced, and she never ever thought she would get pregnant since she hadn't yet. But what she said she thought did it was that her emotional state had changed after Kennedy was assassinated, and therein she became pregnant. Charles became a father. And that also probably has a lot to do with why he stayed here as long as he did. One of the things that she said was that he would be so unnerved and so unsettled by having this job that when he wasn't at work, he had a giant cheese box at home that he kept his documents in. He would pull them out, and he would take various numbered cards, and he would practice just sitting there throwing the cards into the slots for fear of losing his job. And he'd actually told people he would sit there and do it so long that when he would get up and walk away from his post, he would leave a puddle of sweat. Isn't that unbelievable? Anyway, he pushed it as far as he could, and he said the reason he ended up having to leave was it was literally going to kill him. He said, I was completely overstressed, and beyond that, every day when I would leave work, my arms hurt so bad I couldn't even lift them. Finally, Bukowski had never missed a day writing throughout the time that he worked here. He always woke up always drank, and always wrote. He met a man who found his writing that worked at a print shop and offered to print some of his poetry, and it ended up selling pretty well. And the man, John Martin, who ended up doing that, ended up striking a deal with Charles that if he could figure out a way to pay him, he would like to publish him. So Charles told him how much he needed to live off of per month, and if he could get that he would quit his job here. And he did, in fact, quit his job here then. And that's when he ended up writing his masterpiece, Post Office. If you've never read Charles Bukowski or know anything about him, that's a really good place to start, because he really outlines his entire life with his job here and his time outside of here, and how his emotional state was impacted in Post Office. And you can actually go on YouTube and listen to the audiobook, and I think you would really enjoy it. It's definitely worth your time. He ended up completing that book in a very short amount of time. I believe it was within a month. And he said, when you're scared to death, you can do anything. And he was no longer having a job, no longer had the security, and he was scared to death. But this, for 11 and a half years, was Charles Bukowski's third shift hell.